And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our virtual presentation of Tom Zoellner's The National Road. Before we begin, some quick guidelines. If you would like to ask a question for the Q&A, just use the Ask a Question button directly below the viewer screen. Also, you can vote for any questions you find interesting, and they'll make their way to the top of the list. And also, please consider supporting Vroman's tonight by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, The National Road. Just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen, and it will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. And let me briefly introduce our guests, and then I'll let them take it away. So, Tom Zoellner is the author and co-author of 8 previous nonfiction titles, including Island on Fire, The Heartless Stone, and Train, Riding the Rails That Created the Modern World from Trans-Siberian to the Southwest Chief. He is the politics editor of the Los Angeles Review of Books, and his writing has appeared in The Atlantic, Harper's, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, and many more. Joining him tonight as moderator is Tod Goldberg, the award-winning journalist and author of a dozen books, including Gangsterland, which was a finalist for the Hammett Prize, and also 5 books in the popular Burn Notice series. His work has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Best American Essays, and he has won 5 Nevada Press Association awards. Now I'm going to turn things over to our speakers. Enjoy the talk, everyone.
Hey, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Hey, Tom, nice to see you.
Man. Great to see you.
You look like you are sitting in your study in a castle somewhere in England. Is that correct?
It is a complete illusion. No, these are the only books I have in my house, actually. So, carefully arranged.
See, we both look like at any moment, if MSNBC asked us to come on, we would be prepared and people would know us by our bookshelves at the very
Sure.
least.
Well, that Twitter account, Room Raider, has got me paranoid of, what's behind me,
I'm not saying that I follow that account religiously, but I follow it religiously. Well, thank you so much, everybody that's out there in Vroman's land for coming to watch us tonight. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions and comments. The best thing you can do, really, when asking a question is to start off with a comment, they say. And I'm going to put my headphones on so that I'm not echoing for all of you also. So we'll do that in just one sec here. Let me do that. All right. So let's start, Tom, by asking the obvious question, which is, how on earth did you become a writer? Did you come from people who read? Were you always a writer? What was your initial process as a young person?
One of the conventional answers to that question is, I wasn't qualified to do anything else. And in my case, that might not be far from true. I got fired from Black Angus restaurants.
No one gets fired from
yeah, you really have to work to get fired from Black Angus. Either outright robbing the restaurant or poisoning the food, or some other.
You don't want to leave a place where you have access to discount wagon wheels either.
The fringe benefits at that place were dubious. I was a terrible busboy, and so I think that inculcated early a sense that I'd better find something to do, or risk a chain of summary dismissals for the rest of my career.
Were you a reader though when you were a young person? Were there books in your house?
Yeah, conventional thing with under the covers with a flashlight. The usual things. Although mainly reading 1940s young adult fiction, actually.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know. My grandparents had a home in a small town in Kansas, and it's what my dad had stockpiled from his youth, and for whatever reason, that sort of apple cheek sensibility sort of appealed to me.
That must be very popular at school.
Yeah. I mean, we're both Gen Xers. I'm sure you remember the wave of young adult fiction that dealt with the serious issues of the time.
Yes,
which involved drinking, and maybe kissing before the age of 13.
Yeah. I do. Those are some hot button issues.
Yeah.
So you left the Angus and you decided I got to figure out something that might. And I know in the book, we should hold up the book. This is Tom's brand new book. Tom, by the way, has been very active this pandemic. This is the 14th book Tom has published since we've been in lockdown. Actually, his second, but which is 2 more than most of us. You talk a little bit in here about when you were starting out as a journalist, you were also trying to write fiction. Was that where you started as a writer as well, just in general, trying to write short fiction or novels?
Oh yeah. I mean, Todd, I'm not, trying to flatter you, but I'm sort of in awe of what you and, your colleagues on the fiction side do. There's no way I could do that, create a convincing story, maintain characters. I found that, and I know novelists and nonfiction writers say this about each other, but maintain, and you do both, so maybe this doesn't apply to you, but maintaining that fictional universe requires a standard of truth that somehow spiritually higher than that of nonfiction, where there's a really easy set of railroad tracks to follow. It happened, therefore write it down. I'm making it sound obviously more simple than it is, but to dream up that netherworld, man, that takes a interplanetary consciousness.
Well, when you have an idea of something that you want to do, now obviously throughout this book, you're interacting both with people and with history, but that's what you've often done for a lot of your work. That you throughout the many books of yours that I've read, it's often looking at a thing and then looking at what led to that thing. Even your book about Gabby Giffords, and so. When you have an idea right now of something that you want to write about, is it not about a person? It's more about like a philosophy or an idea?
Kind of. And I'll tell you something really magical that happens during the construction of a piece of art. And I bet you found this too in your work, that, you just start to tell a story, and then halfway through, you suddenly have this realization of what it's really about, some people call it the big A, the larger aboutness that kind of sneaks up on you. And it's this little, I'm kind of ripping off Stephen King here, but it's like these little rockets that are shot up from your subconscious. And that's really one of the best moments you have as a writer. Publication sucks compared to that moment of realization about, because, once it's published, you can't change it, and it's out there in all of its moth-eaten glory. But so
you prefer, you're the one person who prefers to write versus to have been published.
I'm going to give a qualified yes to that. I mean, you might have gotten this before too. When you introduce yourself to somebody new, they'll say, "What do you do?" And you'll tell them what you do, and they'll come back with, "Oh, you must really like writing." I mean, do you like writing, Todd?
I do like writing.
I don't know, man. I find it really painful. And what
context, Tom, like I get to kill people in my writing. You have to talk about why people get killed. I just get to shot.
Yeah, you don't like where something's going. You, like, as Samuel L. Jackson says, just put a cap in their ass, right?
That's literally the house I've built. Well, that actually lends credence to one of the big parts of this book. So just sort of in general, this is a road book. I mean, obviously the title is a national road, but it's you going through different parts of the United States and examining different aspects of American culture. But as you were doing these things, I know that some of these essays were written over the course of many years. Were you writing these essays thinking, "Oh, I'm going to find a book to line these all together in"? Or did you write a bunch of essays and realize, "Oh, I think I have a book somewhere within this"?
Wrote a bunch of stuff and realized, here's that big A coming up again, that it all came back to geography. And, that you get this magnetic pull. I mean, anyone who's listening tonight who writes, I'm sure knows what I'm talking about, where, you don't really fully understand why you're drawn to the subjects that you are, or why your sentences are always kind of bending a certain way. And then, the art of listening to that, I'm not very good at it, it really has to, sneak up and whap me on the back of the head. And, that's finally what happened. And I realized, this is about American geography and about the ways that it determines who we are, but also the ways that it does not determine who we are. So
right.
paradox.
So I was struck by a lot of things. And viewers, if you are just joining us because you didn't have anything else to do, you didn't think Rachel Maddow was going to be on tonight, the book, The National Road, is an absolutely fantastic piece of nonfiction. And it also does the thing that is remarkable for us right now, which is that it takes us out of our homes. Tom, you're going across the United States and visiting small towns and big towns alike. But you say at one point in the book that you have actually driven across the country about 30 times, and that you just love to be in your car and driving, and also you love to be driving by yourself, which I think is interesting. We'll get to now that you have a child and a family. Like, is this part of your life done with? But can you talk about what it feels like to be that stranger coming into town and talking to people? I think that runs sort of counter to, I think, a lot of what we feel right now. Like, oh God, I can't imagine talking to someone again. What is that thing in you that makes you want to get in the car, drive somewhere, and meet a stranger?
Oh gosh, I mean, the world is endlessly curious, and it's a cliche but true. Everyone has a story, even if they're a curmudgeon who's off-putting. They got something to tell you. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a huge egomaniac, so I'm not trying to compare myself to him in this, because it would be obnoxious. But what he said was, what he tries to remember is that every person that he meets is in some way his superior. And I think, people that I meet are in lots of ways my superior. And they have something to say. They have something to tell me. And, being aware of that helps enormously. And, I'm kind of shy. It's really hard to, walk into a diner in, Lima, Ohio, and just start talking to someone. It's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does this guy want from me? Is the question. This one time in a town called Oxford, Kansas, I was overhearing a conversation among people who had, T-shirts with guns on them, and they were talking about, guess who? Rachel Maddow.
Oh.
In disparaging terms, and can you believe what she said last night, and blah 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 blah. And so I finished my. What's that?
At least they're watching.
At least they're watching, and I was in sort of a I don't know what kind of mood, sort of chipper or cheeky or whatever, and so I said, screw it, I'm going to do this, and walked over and I said, hi, I'm one of those California liberals you're always hearing about. You got any Confederate statues in your town? Because I want to rip one down. Can you give me direction? I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing to say.
Right.
But it kind of sort of broke the ice. 2 people in that table were like really amused. The other 3 like wanted nothing to do with me.
Right.
But it started a conversation, and it's one that I remember today. It was a lot more memorable than just sort of eating and leaving.
Well, you do a lot in this book of talking, I think, ostensibly to what you and I might consider the other side. People that have a different political bent than you and I have as your basic California liberals. Well, you're basic. I'm a California liberal. But I was particularly struck by in the book the sections that take place both in Arizona and Nevada, which have been on a lot of people's minds over the course of the last, it feels like 800 days, but it's been 2 weeks, and about who people vote for and what they want and what their idea of liberty is specifically. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of changing ethos of both Arizona and Nevada, from the place that you knew when you were a young person to the place that you're driving through in the sections of the book?
Sure. And just as a side note, the longest essay in the book is dedicated to the state of Nevada, which I think is such a metonymy for the United States in so many ways, and physically gorgeous, internally contradictory. Mark Cooper, who's someone I've fought with online but never actually met, in the way of conversations these days. He called Las Vegas the last honest town in America.
I agree with that. Writes about Las Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, it's a geography that, Herman Melville said that, mariners all over the world know the streets of Nantucket better than they do their own, home countries. And in some sense, many, if not most Americans know where the streets in Las Vegas go, because it is that safety valve, for the country. It's long been, to quote Mario Puzo, like a cordon sanitaire around which, we can let, safe, controlled expulsions of our id, let go. But to the political aspect, Nevada's famously, a tight swing state. And, in it too, you see that famous urban-rural divide. Clark and Washoe counties kind of, tip the balance for, White Pine and Nye and all the other rural counties. And, this is a mirror for the United States. 477 counties in this great land voted for Joe Biden. Their main industries are mainly founded on financial services and the information economy. 2,900 counties voted for Donald Trump. We've all seen the famous maps that, where it's like land votes and not people. And those counties account for just 30% of the US GDP. And their industries are mainly founded on agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. Places where place becomes enormously important, where you're rooted to that ground, because that's where the money is. It's in the hospital where you're pulling a shift as a nurse or a doctor. It's in the school where you're teaching. It's in the fields where you're farming. The light manufacturing that still exists in this country. The retail and the dying shopping mall on the edge of town. You got to be there. Typically, in those 477 other counties, you don't need to be there necessarily. You have the liberty of working wherever you want to work. That is the paradox of geography. We're more rooted than ever, depending on who we are, yet we're more untethered from it than ever before. And this creates great tensions in terms of what the country means.
Well, and the interesting thing about the section on Nevada, which is called Searchlight in the book, for those of you that are reading it, you talk about prostitution and about the mythology of the state and all of these things, these things that you might assume are tenets of liberalism, but when in fact the places that the dens of prostitution are owned by conservative Republicans, people that are outside what you would imagine their family values might be. And so, I agree that Nevada is the one honest state. They tell you they're going to cheat you, and then they do. They tell you that they're dishonest, and then they are. And they tell you not to, believe anything that you see with your eyes, and you shouldn't. And so it really is an interesting parallel. But Arizona seems like a different animal. Arizona seemed like the gatekeeper, and you talk about this a bit in the book, like the gatekeeper of sort of standard West Coast conservatism. But now all of a sudden it's having this change. What do you account for that change? I mean, your time living there, your time driving through there, and of course your time, having been an American.
The short answer is cheap housing, and an easy lifestyle with non-threatening weather, except for 3 months in the summer, and a place that erases history, and what California used to be sort of famous for, a place of reinvention. The famous realtors formula is for every 3 that are moving in, 2 are moving out. Nevada's got similar housing dynamics, by the way. And to your list of Nevada paradoxes, I would add that there's no place where you can be more anonymous. You can exchange thousands of dollars worth of business at a blackjack table without a word being spoken,
right?
Except good luck. Changing 20, changing hundreds. But it's also paradoxically the place where you are most watched.
Right.
You are filmed at every minute of every day. The Nevada chapter involves a climb up to the lookout to the only legal place where you can see Area 51, which is way out in the middle of BFE, 25 miles down a, 4-wheel drive road. But within 30 minutes of my being up there, an F-16, not some exotic aircraft that they're testing out there, but, a conventional airplane, like, banked right in front of me. basically just to say, hey, buddy, we see you.
We see you, Vanilla ISIS. You're not gonna break into Area 51 and steal our aliens. Well, Area 51 is it's amusing. 2020 is an amusing year inside the horror, because 2020 is the year where the New York Times ran video of space aliens. The United States government said, "Yeah, there's probably space aliens," and everyone was just like,
"Yeah,
that's fine. We'll talk about that next year." And of course, Area 51 has always been this it's a secret place where they're holding aliens. It's a secret place that everybody knows about. It's the worst kept secret in the world. Everyone knows the location of the secret place.
Right. But I'll tell you and other people who are listening to this a really cool secret, actually. There are tours available which are really hard to get a spot on into the Nevada test site, which is where we exploded 4 figures worth of nuclear weapons, and where you can see that what they call Doomtown. The house that was left remaining standing through what was called the Apple II test. They'll take you through it, and I fought for more than a year for one of those spots, and I kind of played the journalist card and said, hey, can you get me on? And then finally I talked to someone who I'd never pleaded with before there, who said, I'll never forget this. She said, well, I can get you on the waste tour. And I said, great. And later, after hanging up, I thought, what is the waste tour? And it turned out it was like a busload of people who were there for a hazardous waste conference in Vegas. And so I'm among them, and this takes you to among the bombing sites. This takes you to the place where they're burying low level nuclear waste.
Mm-hmm.
The high level stuff doesn't go to Yucca Mountain anymore. It's just kept in place.
Yeah, that's the other nice thing about Nevada. It's everyone's lying to you, and you're going to be irradiated. What a wonderful place to live, Clark County for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about the framing of the book, which is you got lucky in that before the book went to press, you were able to actually write about this new world that we're in the midst of an unending pandemic, which I'm sure it's gonna be over soon, and then I'm gonna get a real haircut, which I'm looking forward to, and I'll start wearing hard pants again. But you were able to write about the pandemic a little bit, but as I was reading the book, I kept having this feeling of anxiety, because even though I know this stuff has happened in the past, every time you drive into a new town and you go into a bar and you talk to someone or you interview someone, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to get sick. Oh my God, he shouldn't be talking to a stranger. Oh my God, this and this and this. So 2 questions about that. Were you concerned that this would be a problem for readers with the book coming out right now? And do you feel like in the future, how long will it take after there's a vaccine before someone feels comfortable walking into a bar and talking to a stranger again, shaking someone's hand?
Yeah, isn't that going to be like diving into a cold pool, after you've just come out of the sauna? It's going to be cognitive shock. I'm looking forward to it. I miss people. You and I talked off camera about how we both become total misanthropes. And, I hate that.
Pretty close to begin with.
Yeah. Just push you over, move the needle over into the red zone. Yeah. I do hope that there is a burst of creativity that follows this pandemic, the same way that the Roaring '20s followed the Spanish flu, influenza. That's a double negative, but the 1918, 1919. And, the COVID essay in this book, which an editor, a wonderful editor that we mutually share, Dan Smetanka, let me slip in at the last minute, because the subtitle of the book is Dispatches from a Changing America. To have not have said something about COVID would have been really weird.
Right.
And, there's a lot to say about it. It's a revelation of kind of what lies underneath our masks, of our national character, the way that we've been, literally we're putting on masks now, but, this demonstrates our deep social divisions. Mm-hmm. This demonstrates the distance that we've followed from the time when Octavio Paz, in his wonderful book, Labyrinth of Solitude, tried to assess the American character and terms of fidelity to a certain Puritan tradition, a contradictory impulse of the Southern plantation culture. These contradictions live within us, and pandemic only brought that closer to the surface, combined with the wonderful experience of Trumpism.
And the whole basis though of the book, which is getting in your car and traveling these roads. Like I live in Palm Springs, and I have not left the Coachella Valley except for once for a funeral in 9 months. And so the even just your wanderlust, the thing that defines your ability to write this book, has been stopped during this time. That's got to be a challenge for you artistically. But what does it say about our nation's character when, the idea of you can always go west or wherever, you can always get in your car and have that adventure, when that ability is stopped? Since we are at home, have we fundamentally changed the course of our national personality during this time?
We may have, and it was changing already, even before the pandemic descended. Fewer people are moving now than at any point since 1950, statistics show. Changing addresses, this used to be the famous sort of American habit. Alcoholics call it taking the geographic cure. When you burn out somewhere, move somewhere else, and I know exactly what that's like. Yeah, we're stuck. But we were staying before. As for the inability to take road trips, I say that that's a great blessing to anyone who is unfortunate to be in the car with me. I'm an extremely annoying person to go on a trip with, because, or I should clarify that, in the passenger seat, I'm fine. Hopefully I'm, adequately amusing. In the driver's seat, it's terrible because, I'm going to be taking you down all kinds of diversions just to see trivial stuff. And you're going to be getting very impatient with me.
But I mean, so we talked about this at the top, that one of your great joys is to drive the highways and the byways of America by yourself. But you have a child now, you're in a relationship. What's it going to be like when you filled up the family roadster and they want to look at the great ball of twine, and you're like, I'd like to see where a religious leader hung himself. Like, is that going to change how you do your own work?
It's going to be a fight night on wheels, I guess. I'm being facetious, of course. Some temper. A sobering sentence that I read in Henry David Thoreau wrote this essay. It's called Walking. He says that as age, you tend to travel in smaller and smaller circumference. And isn't that sad? Right?
It is.
I don't want to do that, but yet I feel that. The old joke about when after you get north of 40, when given the choice between two temptations, you'll take the one that gets you home faster.
Well, now, granted, I saw that Governor Newsom today put in an order that we can't be out of our homes between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. I haven't left my house after 10 p.m. since 1996. So I'm not too terribly concerned about that. So that's good. Looks like we lost Tom's video here, but we can still hear you, Tom. So don't worry. Your audience can still hear you if they can't see you.
Sure.
So in terms of the things, there you are. You're back. The things that you're obsessed by, and that this book shows. I'm fascinated by your desire to seek out at all turns great sites of Mormon history. Where does this come from? Oh, looks like we lost Tom. Looks like Tom has frozen. Well, I can tell you that Tom's great searches for Mormon history are some of the most entertaining portions of the book. I promise you. You'll love them. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I'm sure Tom will reconnect here in just 1 second, and we can get him back. There he is. You're back. Welcome back.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Sorry about that.
So where does your great love of niche Mormon sites come from?
Yeah, because of my haphazard way of traveling, I would wind up, because I wanted to see these places. It'd be like after dark because I was too busy, screwing around somewhere else. And, there was one of those accidental things. I realized, man, I'm always going to these places at night and occasionally trespassing. So for which I hope the church would forgive me. And yeah, I'm not LDS. I have a respect for the church. I don't, subscribe to the theology, but nevertheless, there is something about the sanctification of the American continent that really speaks to the urge towards faith, towards worship. I am a person of faith, not in the forms of Mormonism, but I do find even within that, I'm going to say it, sort of extremely white bread way of, communications. The whole thing is saturated in PR. But still within it, there is genuine spirituality, which people really, really respond to. And, I'm a student of that, I guess you'd say. Having grown up, obviously, in the Southwest, you're going to know someone who's LDS. And then also having lived in Salt Lake City and been, having the view of the Salt Lake Temple out my, living room window.
Well, I think the book touches on faith in a lot of different ways. It touches on, obviously, religious faith, but it seems like every place you go to, you find someone who has a belief system that brackets their life. So when you're going and finding the highest points in a given state, or you're talking to people who work in journalism, or you're speaking to someone who runs, the city council of a small town, all of them are sort of bound by peculiar covenants that seem sort of uniquely American. Was that something that you thought you'd find out there in the world, or is it something that surprised you?
Yeah, we all live by codes, and I'm a believer, and I mean this in both a religious and a secular sense. Scratch an atheist, and you'll find a very religious person underneath. The urge to worship is within us all, and for 10 years, my first career. I had a near religious love of newspapers, which, that was with all the wisdom of becoming a buggy whip manufacturer in, 1901. It turned out to be a career choice that would lead to inevitable, financial distress and heartbreak. And, there is something deeply satisfying about the narrative of a city as seen through its newspaper. You're blessed where you live to have, even though it's owned by Gannett, who I used to work for, the Desert Sun, which, still I think does a good job of covering the geography of your quite unique area of the country, which deserves like really good narration. Part of the reason to pick up a good newspaper is to just learn something about where you live, to be educated on this spot on which we occupy the planet for time, and we want to feel like it's a place of significance, that it's special somehow. And newspapers can bring that.
And you talk a bit about how folks that were in the newspaper business lack the one ability that they would seemingly have, which is the ability to see a little bit into the future to predict what their own business is going to be like.
Oh my God.
But of course, no one in the newspaper business was smart enough to realize that the internet, this thing that everyone was on, was going to usurp their business. Which, it's a curious thing. But you also say in one of your essays, one of your great joys is to, go to a small town and read the local news and see what, what the city council is fighting about in small town America, and whatever the scandal is in small town America. And it seems to me that that sort of connection to the larger place, or the smaller place in some cases, is the thing that journalism, and in fact, the kind of writing that you're doing in this book, really is important for, like, to understand that not everything needs to be written about on a national level, but what happens person to person is still really important. And the best parts of this book are when you are sitting there at a bar having a cheeseburger and drinking your third whiskey, and talking to a person about what they want and what they need. And there seems to be a real sense of, people want something better, but they don't even know what that better looks like. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, Todd, as human beings, we've got such a soda straw view of the world. We're floating down a river on a raft on our backs, and we're looking up at the sky through a soda straw, and that's all we can see. And, it's just marvelous and, majestic and baffling and tragic and intimidating that at this very moment, there are 300 million things. I'm going to ignore the rest of the world for the time being. 350 million little things going on,
Right.
And then when we drive through a town, we're driving through a hive of people who, we'll never meet, who, cry, weep. I said that already. Dream, have ambitions, get frustrated. They fall in love, they get their hearts broken, they marry, they have kids, they work, they suffer, they die. And, we never get a smidgen of it,
Mm-hmm.
and reading the local paper is a window into that, to drive into, Bowling Green, Kentucky, and read the obituary of someone who you now, won't meet this side of the veil, and just sort of appreciate, like, wow, they had this life that was going on simultaneously with mine, and I never met them. And
it's so weird. There was a woman who. So I live in a big gated community in Palm Springs, and there was a woman a few years ago who lives inside the gated community who was murdered, and her body was dumped in our backyard, basically on the golf course behind our house. And my wife went for a run in the morning, and she saw the police in the corner and all that stuff. And I became a little obsessed with this woman because we had lived our entire lives within 3 blocks of each other, our entire lives. She had grown up down the street from me in Palm Springs. She'd worked down the street from me in Palm Desert. She moved into this community where I lived. And all of our lives, we had never intersected. And then she ends up a murder victim in my backyard. And there's all these intersections that go on, all these lives of substance that you never get to know about because you are, in fact, living in your own bubble of self-importance.
Yeah. Well, I think I can add that when I was a crime reporter, occasionally I would fall in love with people whose, in effect, their obituary I was writing in the form of a crime story. I realized this was a really fascinating person, and somehow the fact of their passing, made me want to learn more. And the act of writing, what amounted to police blotter coverage, was in some stupid way like trying to save them.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I can't explain, redeem them, let them know, or let the universe know that, that this happened and that this was like a loss.
That they had existed. They hadn't lived for nothing.
Yeah. And now that newspapers are shrinking down to pamphlets, the room to, create that record for, the microfiche or for the digital archives, that's shrinking. And that's the real tragedy of the internet.
One, and you talk a bit in the book about how basically Craigslist killed the American advertising business, classified business, which is true. But if the papers are gone, where do the obituaries go? You never get to see those either. So I got one last question for you, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience. So, folks, if you have questions, type them in there, and in just a second we're going to pull them up, and we'll start answering your stuff. Any question, large or small. There are no dumb questions, just dumb people with bad questions. Anyway, can you actually tell us about the National Road, which I had never heard of and I was fascinated by, and it gets the title of your book?
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson had Infrastructure Week at the White House in 1803. Realizing that some great project needed to be done to unite all these disparate settlements that were happening out on the exotic frontiers of Ohio, Indiana, and what would become Illinois. And so this was, grading and not paving, of course, but, making a flat, easy road for commerce to be done out there. And so I've told the story before. The original title of this book was Your Land, little echo of Woody Guthrie, but Dan Spatanka, the editor at Counterpoint, convinced me that the real title was The National Road. which is the
Yes.
title of one of the essays, and he was right.
He's
And,
right. He's always right.
And Dan's, always listen to what Dan says. And, that came because, I was writing about Dollar General stores, this invasion of the yellow and black flag of little box commerce as opposed to big box commerce, right? These are these like kind of cinder block deals that, there are tens of thousands of them across the US. And when they come to your town, it's generally a sign that, you're on the way down,
right?
Because they cater to low income customers. And I want to say that, like, I'm not, looking down on this or being pejorative about it, because this actually is kind of a good thing, because they do help people, without the means to shop at Vons or Ralph's or Kroger, the ability to buy smaller portions and to, make the buck go further. That's a good thing. You can decorate your house. To walk into one of these things is like this genius, explosion of color. They're very carefully arranged. It looks like a chaos, but it's actually not. Very logical. But it does represent, obviously, a further stake in the heart of small town businesses.
Right.
They're generic. They're monoculture. They're like the Hampton Inn or the Del Taco. They don't really add any.
I would murder a bun taco right now.
Anyway, one of the rare cases where neighbors got together and stopped a Dollar General from coming in was, on this road to the west of Springfield, Ohio. That was the national road. That was the actual paved, right of way of what was called the National Road. And the address of this was something like 6500 National Road. And it occurred to me that this modern road of commerce that Thomas Jefferson envisioned is actually a spiderweb of Dollar Generals.
And how far did the National Road get to?
Vandalia, Illinois, and then Congress lost interest.
Now that is that's not even a metaphor. That's just accurate. It's a national road, or it's just Southwest Illinois.
Good enough. You take it from here.
How long did it take them to get there?
I think that petered out in the 1830s. That's when Abraham Lincoln had a hand in moving the Illinois capital from Vandalia to Springfield, Illinois, where it still is today.
So 27 years of them doing it, and they only got to Illinois, and then they're like,
yeah.
Well, look, we're going to have trains, so we don't need this anymore.
And that really was at the dawn of the railroads. So here we are in the United States, where technology usurps the last great thing.
So basically, it's a parable for our high-speed train that's never going to be built here in California.
Exactly. Or the Zoom classes that you and I never thought we'd be teaching.
All right, let's see here. We've got a couple questions that we'll pull up here. The first one is from the excellent writer Linnell George. Hi, Tom.
Hey,
you mentioned at the start the challenges of the icebreaker. Did it get easier as you moved across the country? Were there places that were easier to connect with people? Were there devices that you began to lean on, or was each situation different?
Yeah, I'm like I said before, I really am shy. It takes a lot of nerve to go up to a rando and strike up conversation. And I kind of went off of two questions pioneered by John Gunther, the Chicago journalist of the mid 20th century. I think he's still one of the absolute genius writers ever to live in America. And he would go to towns, and ask people two questions. What makes this town special? What differentiates, Oxford, Kansas from the rest of Kansas? What do you guys got here that's really interesting? And the second question, who runs this town?
Oh,
who's the boss? And whether that's, an individual that wields a lot of power, which is sometimes the case, or an economic interest, or a certain more abstract principle. Sometimes you can get really interesting answers as to sort of the invisible webs of power that are absolutely present in every American municipality. Well, if I can make a plug here for one of the essays in the book called "Welcome to Dirty Town," which is about corrupt municipalities and how they got that way. And
it's a great piece.
Thanks. My thesis for it is, if you want to know why town government is bad, it usually has roots in the town's origin stories. Find out why, what the circumstances were, why the town was founded, and somehow that malign spirit, tends to live on.
Yeah, and it also is part and parcel to large problems of bad policing and systemic racism and things of that nature. I mean, it's a direct forebear. Let's see here. We have another question. What was your experience publishing 2 books during a pandemic? That's a good question.
First of all, I want to say, I've been really lucky in a lot of ways. I haven't gotten sick, knock on wood. I didn't lose a business. This wasn't my first book. Any number of things terrible things, losing people that have happened to people during this terrible national experience. And so, I don't want to play any violence for me, and no one should feel sorry for me. That said, it's rough. I mean, you write a book, and up to the point where it's not to, try and be famous or make money or stuff like that. You just
I've been doing it all wrong.
You have something to say. You want it hopefully to touch people and be heard. I think it's a primal instinct in all of us that it goes back to the baby's cry. We want to say, listen, there's something here. We want to connect. We want to be understood. And writing a book is one way to do that. And that it has kind of gotten lost in the virus. That's not great. But again, I don't count myself as an unlucky fellow during this whole thing.
And I think the nice thing is that there will be another side to this, and that other side will coincide with the paperback release. And that will be great.
God willing.
That will be a wonderful time. So I think we've got time for a couple more questions here. Let's see here. Tom, some people have called the Lincoln Highway the National Road. Can you draw any link between US 20 and Jefferson's National Road?
Oh, I love this question. And I want to pump a book that's a quarter century old. It's called The Lincoln Highway by a wonderful author named Drake Hokanson, who did the category killer job of writing about that road, which was pioneered in the 1920s as a sort of way of promoting auto travel. The southern version was called the Dixie Highway, pioneered by a man named Carl Fisher. He of Fisher Automotive fame, and also who helped found Miami Beach. Yet another friend's book I want to plug. Tammy Ingram did a wonderful book called The Dixie Highway. I used to live off the Lincoln Highway in Cheyenne, Wyoming, my first newspaper job. And here you can find, actually in the Bay Area, sorry, let me correct my highways. You can find these little wonderful concrete markers with the L on them, these sort of stand-up things that mark the Lincoln Highway. That was one of these national roads. And so, it performed a function of its day and, set the pattern for a lot of what would come later.
All right. That's fascinating. I'm learning a lot about the highways and byways of America. The last question, I don't quite know what she's talking about, but we'll ask it because we don't want to leave anyone out here, Tom. Linda asks, say more about the big A. What does the A stand for? I don't know if she's talking about Anaheim, Arizona. What you talking about here?
Yeah. Here's my nonfiction class that I teach in Chapman University in 2 sentences. Okay. I mean, everything comes back to this. When you're writing, particularly nonfiction, there's a literal subject. There's the surface subject of what you're writing about, which is plainly apparent to everyone. And then there's the ghost subject that hovers above, and is what you're really writing about. It's the true subject of, the piece. It's sometimes it's not even, laid out, and it's for the reader to discover, and it's often what the writer discovered in the course of writing it. Willa Cather said that, you know, real skill, and she's talking about fiction writing, is sketching a tree, you know, through your words in such a way that you never name the tree, but is so plain, should be so plain, that the reader can almost feel the leaves and grasp the roots, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that essay that I mentioned called Searchlight about Nevada, you know, that's about, capital A, you know, things vanishing, insubstantiability.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, the things that you're promised in Las Vegas, Todd, that are total, you know, mirages, which is the actual name of, you know, a pioneering resort.
Right. You know, you never want to gamble in a place called the Mirage.
You know,
it's like terrible idea. Steve Wynn's a genius. He tells you he's going to rip you off, and he does it.
And you enjoy it.
And you enjoy it. Well, Tom, thank you so much for sitting here and chatting with me. I've had a wonderful time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to turn it back over to the lovely folks here at Vroman's who are going to say something nice to you.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Todd. That was such a fun conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We greatly appreciate your time. And if you would like to purchase a copy of The National Road, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer's screen. It will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Also, for those who tuned in late, don't worry, the replay will be available within an hour. Just use the same link. You can also share with any friends who were unable to make it tonight, and they can tune into the talk. And I think that about covers it. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good evening. Great.
Thanks.